Yeah, well, there's a few things to that. I could talk for a few hours now.
Go ahead. Go ahead. We're all ears.
One of them is this idea that information is negative or positive. It's information. Knowledge is not negative or positive. It's knowledge. And, you can see the uncovering of appalling happenings and manipulations. I spent decades doing that. You can see that as negative. And over the years, some of the most vehement critics of me have been so-called spiritual people, because they've said to me, "Oh, that's negative. You're putting out all that negative information." Well, I don't perceive it as negative, and I don't think that knowledge is negative. It's knowledge that of, for instance, the appalling things that are going on, who's doing them and how, that gives you the gift of being able to understand the game and therefore play it in a more effective way. If you don't know how you're being manipulated, or even that you are being manipulated, then nothing's going to stop you being manipulated. If someone's manipulating you behind your back, you've got no chance of doing anything about it. And then when someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Look, I've got something to tell you," that bloke, you've been trusted. Well, you know what he's doing. Now suddenly you have knowledge. It's not nice knowledge, because you don't want to think that this guy's been manipulating you for ages, but you now have the knowledge to stop it. So this information is to me, it's always a way out of here by understanding how we got into here and how we are maintained here. And in terms of what do we do? Well, I can tell you what I've done for 30 years, and that's follow my intuition. It comes from here. There's something that you can think, and you can get emotion from down here, and there are different ways of processing information. But this is where I've been coming from all these years, and this is what I've been following. And people listening to this will understand what I'm saying when I say that you get a feeling here which says yes, which says no, which goes, well, more to know. And that's what I've been doing for all these decades, following this. And this is what's led to the synchronicity of information coming to me, people coming to me, experiences coming to me, because this for me is basically how humanity has become trapped. This says, do what you know to be right. Do what you know to be right. The consequences, okay, you don't go looking for trouble, but if trouble's coming because you're doing what you know to be right, well, trouble can come because I'm doing what I know to be right. That's non-negotiable. But what happens is the head kicks in and the gut kicks in and gives you all the reasons why you shouldn't do what you know to be right. This will give you the fear, and this will list all the consequences and what if, and what happens if you do that. And basically this gets shut down, and you go with this. And this, if you think about it, the head thinking, which is a very low level of awareness, and the gut, fear, emotion, that's what traps people. The people are trapped here. And this other world knows that. That's why it's used that to trap us. But when this comes forward and you do what you intuitively, instinctively know to be right, then that overpowers this. And what I found when I was going through this in the early days is, there's a war goes on between your head and your gut and your heart. A war is probably not a good description, but there is a tussle for influence. And what happens is when you want to follow your heart, you want to follow your intuition. This for me is the energetic connection, the biggest energetic connection to out there. I think the true self resides here during a human experience, the true core of self, or the connection to the true core of self. And what happens is you want to go with this, and then this comes in, gives you all the reasons why you shouldn't, all the consequences of doing that. This gives you the fear consequences, emotional consequences for doing that, and therefore you don't go with it. But what I decided, because you will know that when I came out, first of all, to talk about these things, the spiritual side of it, before I very quickly got into the names, dates, places area in 1990, that I went through enormous levels of ridicule. I mean, historic levels. I mean, it was almost bizarre, the scale of it in this country, where I couldn't walk down any street without being laughed at by people anywhere I went. And you turn the television on, the comedian only had to say my name and people started laughing. And I decided then, coming from where this feeling, that the worst thing I could do by going on with this was to completely mess up one brief experience as a human. And I thought, I can handle that. So I'm going with it. I'm going to see where this goes. And what happens you have this thing going on, because people said to me, when you came out with all that stuff, didn't you know you get ridiculed? Actually, I had actually worked that out, but I did it anyway. And what happens eventually is this tussle stops. It stopped with me anyway, when the head, if you like, observes the fact that when you go with your heart, with your intuition, you may get into some scrapes, because this is not coming from where this is coming from. This is not coming from a sense of reality and action that the 5 sense world you're living in is coming from. So of course you're going to be at odds with the world when you go with this, because that's the whole point of opening your heart to something greater than the 5 sense jail cell. But it observes that when you go with your heart, you may get into some scrapes, you may get into some challenges, but it all works out in the end. And it works out not despite the challenges, but because of them. And I have this phrase, life gives you your greatest gifts brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And when I look at that period of mass ridicule, I don't look back at it with the horror that you would think. I wouldn't say I look back at it with affection, but I look back at it as a wonderful gift, because it cleared me out of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think, which is another version of what are the consequences of me doing this, which keeps people in the prison. Oh, I don't want those consequences. And what happened to me probably about, 93, something like that, is my head and my heart came into sync. So when my intuition now says, well, I'm going to do this, my head goes, okay, let's go. It doesn't say, oh no, consequences, because I'm not bothered about consequences. I'm bothered about doing what I know to be right. And the consequences take care of themselves. And of course, so often when you do what you know to be right, your fear of the consequences stops you doing it. But if you do it, you find that actually it's much easier than you thought it was going to be. And the consequences either are not as bad as you thought they would be, or they're not of the nature you thought they would be, or the experience, the consequence, was a gift to take you to a greater place of awareness and possibility. So I don't think, if I don't do what the authorities tell me to do and basically comply with my own enslavement, what are the consequences for me? Don't think about it. I'm just not complying with my own enslavement. That's crazy. Because when you do that, you are enslaved, and for sure. But the other thing is that if enough people do it, if enough people go with this and do what they know to be right, then there are no consequences, because it becomes unenforceable. You know, you take masks. Well, mask wearing is unenforceable now by the authorities and by law enforcement, because there's not enough of them and there's vast numbers of the population. So what they've had to do is manipulate the population to be the enforcers of masks. This is what they've had to do, get the great chunks of the target population to enforce the masks and these other fascistic impositions upon the population, when they are members of the population that's having them imposed upon them, because there's not enough of them. If people think, well, you know, what do we do? Well, the numbers game alone. The numbers game alone. There's billions of us being manipulated, and at the core of the core, you get the cult inner core globally in one room. So the answer is there, but it comes from a transformation of human perception, both in self-identity and therefore the sense of your own power, but also in people doing what they know to be right, rather than letting consequences imprison them, or perceptions of consequences imprison them.
Would you say that what you're saying, and I totally agree with you, I just want to make sure that I understand it, what you're describing is a personal, individual choice or series of choices or lifestyle of continuing to expand through choices, it would be more powerful than protesting, boycotting, marching? I mean, this is something that's happening from the space between our proverbial ears, heart, as you were talking about earlier. This would be the most powerful thing that we can do from the individual standpoint. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, protest. I mean, I've spoken and taken part in many protests, including lockdown here. I mean, I was at two events in Trafalgar Square in London. They got 35 and 45,000 people.
Wow.
So I'm not against protest, because it can be a symbol of public feeling, and it can let people know, actually, you're not alone in how you see the world. There's vast numbers of people that can see it as well. But protest alone changes nothing. Look at the size of the protest there's been over the years. What changes things is non-cooperation.
Yeah.
It's Gandhi didn't make an impact, for instance, through protest alone. He made an impact by orchestrating non-cooperation. And because, again, you come back to the numbers. There are so few, tiny numbers by comparison to the target population, that are ultimately doing the manipulating, that if the population didn't cooperate, then they couldn't have any power over us. And I've talked before about how easy it is through this acquiescence for this tiny one room of people to impose their will upon the whole population. It's ever so simple. If you think of the human society as a pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid you've got this tiny inner circle, core of the core group of this global cult. They are Satanists, they are psychopaths beyond belief, almost making the word psychopath irrelevant. So extreme are they. And then they impose their will upon the next level of the pyramid below them.
Right.
And that level acquiesces to the imposition of this group. Then the level below, which is acquiesced, then imposes that on the next level, which acquiesces to that and imposes on the next level. Now, very soon after you come down from that pyramid peak, you're meeting now levels of the hierarchy of human society has no idea there is a cult. There's no idea there is an agenda. But the same process continues of imposition, acquiescence, all the way down. And eventually you reach the massive humanity at the bottom of the pyramid. And if we acquiesce, as so many have, not least in the last 12 months, if we acquiesce at that point to that which is those levels that are imposing upon us, in this case, government, law enforcement, etc., then we create and complete a circuit between the tiny few at the top and the mass of the population, which has allowed those tiny few to impose their agenda, their will, upon the entirety of the human population, simply by imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. And again, the answer staring to in the face. We've got to break that circuit. And if we do, then those few at the top have no power whatsoever, because their route to the population has been broken. And given the way the hierarchy works, it's the population that's got to break that circuit, because the people in the middle are almost certainly not going to do it. And that's the answer. It's not finding a solution. We don't need to find a solution. We need to remove the cause problem. The cause of the problem is people acquiescing to authority. And if you look through history, it's always gone on. And they acquiesce for two reasons. They're unthinking, they don't question, they just do whatever they're told because the authority knows best, or they can see that it's not right, but they fear authority, so they conform anyway. Those, again, we're back to exactly what's happened in 2020, and that's how it's done. And the answer is standing there, looking us in the face. But again, this fear of authority is stopping so many people saying, okay, I'm not doing it. I'm not acquiescing with this. And for me, if we're talking about spirituality and the nature of the I, the most important thing is to see the long game, and not see a human life in and of itself. Because if you play the long game, then I look at life and I think I'm all there is ever can be, having an experience. When that experience is over, I'm going to go on exploring forever. So this is just a brief experience. So consequences within that brief experience take on a certain light. But if you see yourself as the labels, the 5 cent self alone, then those same experiences, challenges,